My wife betrayed me with our neighbor, forging a property deal worth $350, $0 to steal my inheritance, then secretly hired a lawyer to lock me out of the house. Now she's claiming I owe her $200, $0 in shared expenses. And I just found out she's been secretly planning to sell everything behind my back. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, let alone in the most insane way possible. Honestly, it all started so subtly I almost didn't notice at first. But then, one day, I found out she'd been screwing around with our neighbor, Mark, and everything just exploded in my face. The worst part, it wasn't just about the affair. No, she had been orchestrating a full-on scam, faking property deals, forging documents, and sneaking around behind my back to steal my inheritance. It's like I was living in some twisted soap opera, only it was real and I was the only one who didn't see it coming. Her name is Lisa. She's always been the kind of woman who could turn on the charm, act like she's the victim, and somehow get everyone to believe her lies. She's pretty, manipulative, and has a way of making herself seem innocent even when she's caught red-handed. We've been together for over 10 years and I thought I knew her inside out. But the signs had been there, small things at first. She started working late more often, claiming it was business, but her phone started ringing at odd hours and she was secretive about her texts. I'd catch her texting someone, quickly hiding the phone when I walked in the room. I shrugged it off, convinced I was just paranoid. Then about 3 months ago, I noticed her acting strange when I brought up money. She'd get defensive, say I was overreacting, or accuse me of not trusting her. She'd say, "It's just business, Jason," whenever I asked about her trips or her phone calls. But last week I found a receipt, one of those online bank transfer receipts, that didn't add up. It was for a property deal worth $350, $0. I didn't even know she was involved in real estate. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. It was like a punch to the gut. That's when I started digging deeper. I decided to check the bank statements more thoroughly. Turns out she'd been funneling money out of our account, forging signatures on documents, and even hiring a lawyer, secretly of course, to get me locked out of the house. I found out she'd been planning to sell everything behind my back, claiming I owed her some shared expenses amounting to $200, $0. She's been lying through her teeth, saying she's just trying to save the family, but her actions paint a very different picture. She's been orchestrating this whole scheme for months, maybe longer. The day I put it all together, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I was furious, devastated, and honestly a little numb. I wanted to believe she was innocent, that I'd misunderstood, but the evidence was overwhelming. The way she lied about everything, her excuses, her tears, I was just trying to protect us, it all sounded so hollow. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I mean, how could someone I trusted turn out to be such a liar, a thief, and a cheat? It was like my entire world was crumbling around me, and I didn't even know where to start putting the pieces back together. After I uncovered everything, I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. I didn't sleep that night, just lying awake in bed staring at the ceiling while my mind raced through every moment, every sign I'd missed. Lisa had always been good at hiding her true nature, but now it was all laid bare. I couldn't understand how I'd been so blind for so long, trusting her with my life, my money, my future. And now I was left with nothing but betrayal and a sinking feeling that I'd lost everything I thought mattered. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit around and pretend this was some bad dream. I needed answers, and I needed to confront her. I found her in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, looking surprisingly calm, almost smug. When I showed her the bank transfer receipt and the forged documents, her face didn't exactly blanch. Instead, she smirked like she was proud of herself for pulling one over on me. That's when she started spinning her lies. She told me she was just trying to protect the family, that the property deal was a way to secure our future, and that I had no right to be angry because I was being paranoid. She claimed all the money she'd taken was for shared expenses, and that I owed her $200, $0 for things like renovations, trips, and investment costs she'd covered. She even had the nerve to say I was ungrateful, that I didn't appreciate all she'd done to keep us afloat. I could see the disdain in her eyes, like she thought she was the victim here, not me. I lost my temper then. I yelled, called her a liar, told her I knew about the affair with Mark. That's when she finally cracked a little, trying to deny everything, but her voice was shaky. I saw the guilt in her eyes, but she quickly switched gears and started crying, saying I was accusing her of things she didn't do, and that I was crazy for thinking she'd cheat on me after all these years. She said she did everything for us, that I was just too blind to see it. That was the moment I realized she'd been planning this entire game from the start. The emotional hit me hard. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to find that the nightmare was real and I was the victim. I couldn't believe she'd lie to my face, steal from us, and then have the nerve to look me in the eyes and pretend everything was fine. I felt like I'd been played for a fool, and I didn't know how to process it all. Every memory, every moment I thought was genuine now seemed tainted by her lies. I knew I had to make a decision. Part of me wanted to scream, to yell at her, to throw her out, but I also knew I needed to think clearly. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I told her I needed some time to think, that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I also told her I was going to dig deeper into her financial mess and find out exactly how much damage she'd done. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight, but deep down, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was done being the naive husband. This betrayal had opened my eyes to who she really was, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Over the next few days, everything felt like a blur. I threw myself into trying to understand just how deep her lies went. I hired a private investigator to look into her financials, and what I found was even worse than I expected. She'd been secretly funneling money into accounts under fake names, setting up shell companies, and even using our joint accounts to cover her tracks. It was clear she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The property deal, the forged documents, the lawyer she hired, all part of a grand scheme to drain my inheritance and turn everything into her own personal empire. I also found out she'd been having an affair with Mark, the neighbor. It explained the late-night calls, the secret meetings, and her strange behavior when I was around. She'd been sneaking out, meeting him in secret, and probably doing much more than just talking. When I confronted her with the evidence, she tried to deny it at first, then broke down and admitted to the affair. But her excuse, that it was just sex, that she needed something else, and she was just trying to keep us afloat. She said Mark was just a distraction, that she loved me and that I was overreacting. Yeah, right. The emotional toll was crushing. I couldn't believe I'd been so stupid for so long. I'd trusted her, built a life with her, and now I found out she'd been using me as a pawn in her game. The anger, the heartbreak, the betrayal, it was all overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies, and every attempt to piece things together only made it worse. My mind kept circling back to the idea that I had been so blind, so naive to think she was anything other than a manipulative, selfish bitch who only cared about herself. In the midst of all this chaos, I started planning my next move. I knew I couldn't stay married to her, not after everything she'd done. I wanted justice. I wanted to make her pay for what she stole, and I wanted to reclaim what was left of my dignity. I began looking into legal options, gathering all the evidence I could: bank statements, forged documents, emails, text messages. I wanted to expose her lies, her schemes, her affair. I also knew I had to get out of the house fast before she managed to sell everything behind my back, or worse, manipulate the situation further. One night I decided to confront her again. I told her I knew about the affair, the property scam, and her plans to sell everything. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she tried to spin her usual lies, saying I was jealous, that I was just paranoid, that she was doing this all for us. But I'd had enough. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I was going to take her to court for everything she'd stolen, and that I'd make sure she paid for her betrayal. Her reaction: she laughed, called me a crazy, jealous husband, and said I'd regret crossing her. That's when I realized she saw me as nothing more than a fool she could manipulate. Honestly, I've never felt so betrayed, so humiliated in my entire life. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, turned out to be a con artist and a cheat. And I was left standing there, furious and broken, knowing I'd have to rebuild my life from scratch. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her win, not without a fight. I'd fight for my inheritance, for my house, for my dignity. And most of all, I'd make sure she paid for every single lie, every stolen dollar, and every moment she wasted pretending to be someone she's not. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about reclaiming my life from the wreckage she left behind. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I moved out of the house, packed up what little I could salvage, and made arrangements to stay somewhere else while I sorted everything out legally. I hired a lawyer, someone sharp, no nonsense, who specialized in financial crimes and divorce cases. I needed to get a grip on her schemes before she managed to sell or hide everything. I knew she was planning to sell the house, the cars, the investment properties, anything she could turn into cash to cover her tracks. While I was doing all this, she kept up her act, pretending to be the innocent wife, crying crocodile tears and claiming she was the victim of my paranoia. She threw in some classic guilt trips, saying I was ruining the family, that I was jealous of Mark, and that I was making her out to be the bad guy. But I knew better. I'd seen her texts, her emails, the secret meetings. There was no denying she was the one cheating, scheming, and stealing. I just couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. One afternoon, I decided to confront her directly one last time, face to face. I told her I knew about the property deal, the forgery, the affair, and her plans to sell everything. I laid out all the evidence I had gathered: bank statements, emails, pictures of her with Mark, everything. Her face turned pale for a second, then she got angry. She spat at me, calling me a jealous, crazy husband, and accused me of trying to ruin her life. She said I was just bitter because I got caught, and that she was doing this all for us, for the family. I told her she was a liar and a thief, and that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. That's when she snapped. She started yelling, calling me names, saying I was just jealous of Mark, that I didn't understand anything, and that I was the one cheating by snooping through her stuff. She tried to turn the tables, making me feel guilty for accusing her of things she hadn't done. But I saw through her lies. I knew her game. She was desperate to keep her plans hidden, to cover her tracks, but I was one step ahead now. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I'd take her to court for everything she'd stolen, and that I'd make sure she paid the price. I also told her I'd be reporting her for fraud, forgery, and theft. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she said I'd regret this, that she'd ruin me if I went through with it. That's when I realized she wasn't just a cheating wife. She was a con artist who'd been using me all along, and now she was trying to manipulate her way out of it. I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Relief because I finally saw her for who she really was. Rage because I'd wasted so much time trusting someone so fundamentally dishonest. I knew I had to act fast before she managed to hide or sell anything else. I was ready to fight for what was mine, for my inheritance, and for my dignity. I told her I was done, that I was done playing her game, and that she'd regret ever crossing me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her destroy me without a fight. This was war, and I was finally ready to win it. The legal process moved quickly once I handed over all my evidence. My lawyer started filing motions, subpoenas, and restraining orders to prevent her from selling anything or transferring assets. Meanwhile, I was digging through her financial accounts myself, trying to get a full picture of her scheme. What I found was staggering: accounts under fake names, offshore money, and evidence of her forging signatures on documents. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, with Mark's help. Every day, new lies and secrets kept surfacing, and I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. Her reaction to all of this was classic. She played the victim, crying, accusing me of trying to ruin her, saying I was jealous of Mark, and claiming I was just paranoid. She insisted she was doing everything for us, that her love for the family justified her actions. But after I presented her with the mountain of evidence, she started to crack. Her facade of innocence crumbled, and she lashed out, calling me crazy, possessive, and obsessed. I could see the desperation in her eyes. She knew she was cornered and she was throwing everything she had, lies, insults, tears, to try and save herself. I stayed calm, even though inside I was boiling with anger. I told her I was filing for divorce and seeking full custody of my inheritance and assets. I explained I was going after everything she'd stolen, including the property deal, the forged documents, and the money she'd siphoned off. I also told her I'd be reporting her to the authorities for fraud and forgery. That's when she really lost it. She screamed at me, calling me a jealous, insecure husband, accusing me of ruining her life, and threatening to destroy me if I didn't back off. But I wasn't going to back down anymore. I'd been patient long enough, and now I was done playing her game. In the days that followed, I watched her trying to spin her story to friends and neighbors, claiming she was the victim of my paranoia and jealousy. But I had the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, emails that proved otherwise. She was the one who'd betrayed me, lied to my face, and tried to steal everything I built. I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I finally saw her true face. Anger because I'd wasted so much time trusting someone so manipulative. I knew I had to stay strong, keep fighting, and make sure she paid for her actions. I also started to focus on rebuilding myself. I reached out to friends, family, and even a counselor. The emotional toll was heavy. I'd been humiliated and betrayed in the worst way. But I refused to let her win. I was determined to get justice and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Her lawyers were fighting hard and she was trying to drag things out, but I was prepared for the long haul. Deep down, I felt a sense of clarity. I'd been a fool for trusting her so blindly, but now I knew exactly who she was, and I'd never let her do this to me again. I was going to take back control, no matter what it took. The final stretch has been the hardest, but also the most revealing. After months of legal battles, her schemes unraveling, and her attempts to manipulate her way out of everything, I finally got to see her cornered completely. The court hearings were intense. She tried every trick in the book, crying crocodile tears, claiming I was trying to ruin her, spinning stories about how she only wanted to protect the family. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the secret accounts, the texts with Mark, everything painted a clear picture. In the end, the judge awarded me full control of the assets, including the house, the investments, and the inheritance. The court also ordered her to pay back every dollar she stole, plus fines for fraud and forgery. She was furious, vowing to fight me forever, but I knew it was over. I finally felt like I could breathe again. The house I built, the inheritance I worked so hard for, none of it was going to her anymore. She lost everything, and honestly, I don't feel any joy about it. Just relief. Relief that I finally see her true face, that I'm finally free from her lies and manipulation. Looking back, I realize how much I let myself ignore the warning signs. I was blinded by love, maybe even by hope that she'd change or that the good in her would somehow win out. But love isn't supposed to come at the expense of honesty, trust, or integrity. I learned the hard way that some people aren't worth fighting for, especially when they're willing to destroy everything for their own greed and selfishness. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life. I've started fresh, with new boundaries, new goals, and a renewed sense of self-respect. I still get angry sometimes at her, at myself for not seeing it sooner, but I also feel stronger. I want others to know, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags, and when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because I learned the hard way that betrayal can come from the person you trust the most. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: don't be naive. Protect yourself, your assets, and your heart. Sometimes the people closest to you will turn out to be the ones who hurt you the most, but you can survive it. You can come out stronger on the other side. I did. And now I'm finally free to start over.